Which one of you did it? Which one of you did it? Which one of you made me the way I am?
Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we return to the Vampire Chronicles and take a look at a rather interesting yet short-lived character in the Vampire Claudia. The 5-year-old child vampire appears in the Interview with the Vampire novel and had quite a turbulent relationship with her adoptive fathers Louis and Lestat, developing what would seem to be two different personalities depending on what father she was in the presence of. Claudia's entire life was surrounded by uncertainty and controversy due to the young age at which she was created, and in today's video I'm going to go into great detail about all aspects of the child vampire's life. I'll be looking at her line of thought, her mindset at different stages of her life, and the lengths that she would go to in order to be free of the child's body she was trapped in for so many years. Let's continue the video. Welcome back everyone and thank you for sticking with me. As I've said in the intro, Claudia's life had so much uncertainty to it and it showed throughout the novel. It's actually quite difficult to read because it is so understandable what she is going through despite none of us ever being in that position. Now, I don't mean a vampire by the way, but I'm pretty sure that everyone watching this video can imagine what it's like to have their mind placed into a 5-year-old's body and be told that it's permanent. Kirsten Dunst, who played Claudia in the on-screen adaptation of Interview, was actually 11 years of age at the time of filming, as director Neil Jordan wanted an older actress to be able to portray the emotions of the character with conviction, something that he didn't believe an actual 5-year-old girl could do in the manner he wanted. So from the off, Dunst is closer to a teen vampire than she is to an immortal child, which in my opinion makes it a little easier to process. So let's dive into Claudia's life and discover everything that made her so unique. She was born in the plague-ridden quarters of 18th century New Orleans. Claudia isn't actually her real name, it was given to her to represent her new start in life as a vampire. Her real name was actually never revealed. Anyway, Claudia was turned at the age of 5, and that's something that is heavily frowned upon by vampires. It's sort of an unwritten rule that the dark gift is never given to anyone so young as they have not yet had enough life experience to be able to deal with the dark gift. Not to mention they have yet to fully mature physically. Claudia was first seen by Louis when he passed by her derelict home. Her mother had already died from plague as Claudia cried for her to wake. Louis gave in to his urges and he fed on the girl. This was a time in Louis' life where he was trying to refrain from feeding on humans, but as the hunger remained, Louis still struggled. The 5-year-old's scent was intoxicating to him. He lusted after her blood from the beginning. Overwhelmed with guilt for what he had done, Louis purposely drew attention to her home in the hope that the plague doctors would help the little girl. Louis' line of thinking was effective and Claudia was taken to the hospital where she was treated as she had definite signs of plague. Lestat then went to the hospital, posed as her father and took the girl, bringing her back to Louis. Lestat had watched Louis and suspected his plan of helping the girl from the very beginning. He mocked Louis for even thinking in such a way, but admitted that was what made Louis so unique. The harsh reality for Louis was that he did in fact feed on the girl, and he left her on the brink of death. She already has the plague, but now Louis has just sped up her mortality. This leaves the vampires with two choices: allow Claudia to die or make her immortal. Louis was outraged at the thought of making a child immortal, but the guilt of allowing her to die, knowing that he was the cause, far outweighed the anger he felt over Claudia becoming a vampire. Lestat, on the other hand, has been a vampire for some time. He knew what he was doing was wrong, but he turned her out of desperation as he did not want Louis to leave him, while also wanting Louis to finally give in to his vampiric nature. Louis describes witnessing Claudia's transition as being in a daze before he actually realized what was happening, that this little girl was drinking from Lestat's wrist after he instructed her to do so. "Damn you!" Louis screamed. But still, This anguish was not even close to the thought of her death, and so Claudia the vampire was born. She opened her vampire eyes for the first time as they quickly filled with bloodlust. She looked at Lestat, wanting more, as if from him it seemed. He sternly looked back at her and said, "Not me, ever again. Do you understand? But I'll show you what to do." Lestat then brought in a houseboy, citing there had been an accident. Entrapping him from behind, he placed him before Claudia. The girl began gnawing and savaging the boy's wrists before Lestat showed her how to drink properly, with emphasis on stopping before the heart stops. The boy then died seconds later. Claudia sat in Lestat's arms and asked, "Where's Mama?" Lestat introduced himself and Louis to her before going on to explain that her mama had left her in the care of them both, and that she would have a new life. It's important to remember that Claudia was just 5 years old. She had no maturity in terms of dealing with cravings, desires, and being told no, as any 5-year-old child would. So if we take into consideration that a vampire's bloodlust is the most overwhelming thought-consuming feeling in existence to them, well, it's not good news for someone with Claudia's youthful, immature, undisciplined mindset. She begins to learn the way of the immortals, to use her dark gift, and learn as much as she could. Lestat revealed information about vampirism to both Louis and Claudia when he felt like doing so, which frustrated them both, Louis more so than Claudia. Claudia began staying in Louis's coffin until eventually she wanted one of her own. She grew very close to Louis, listening to his teachings, and developed a highly philosophical mindset as the years went on. However, on the other side of the coin was the Claudia who also learned from Lestat. She became a murderous, unforgiving huntress who took more pleasure than she should have when luring her victims to their doom under false pretenses. Despite her many lessons from both of her adopted fathers, something Lestat said to her always remained fresh in her mind. Our bodies will stay always as they are, fresh and alive, but we must never hesitate to bring death because it is how we live. It began to resonate more and more with her as she grew past the age of her body's physical maturity. Despite Louis being the one she truly loved, Lestat still shared a great affection for Claudia and always looked upon her as a vision of beauty. He had the best decorators redesign her room with beautiful unicorn paintings and artwork. He had the finest dressmakers, shoemakers, and doll makers all provide him with the best of the best for his daughter, and in her actual youth, she was in awe of everything she got. As the years turned into decades, however, Claudia's mind matured, but her body did not. It would not. It would never blossom into the womanly figure that she so desperately wanted. She began to desire it more and more, to the point where it became an obsession. She was no longer a child in any means whatsoever, but physically. She grew cold towards Lestat. She grew resentful. She began ignoring him and doing things as she pleased, regardless of any consequences. She even became distant with Louis. Things came to a head when Claudia killed, in Lestat's opinion, the two best working maids that Louis and Lestat had ever seen in their employment. A mother and daughter pairing, the women were incredible at the jobs they did, and Lestat was furious to discover their rotting corpses in the old unused kitchen, a clear sign of Claudia not hunting inconspicuously as she left the bodies wherever she pleased. When Lestat confronted her, she didn't answer, but instead asked a question. "Which of you did it? Which of you made me what I am?" Upon learning the truth, that Louis took away her human life, while Lestat gave her an immortal one, Claudia was enraged and scorned both of her adoptive fathers. "I hate you both," she said to Louis after he explained how she came to be a vampire. Despite her anger, Claudia admits that she could never truly hate Louis, that she loves him still, but does not feel the same way about Lestat, someone she actually has developed a hatred for. She wants her and Louis to leave Lestat, to leave their home and travel to Europe to seek out more of their kind. Claudia states that once she found Lestat so charming, recalling on the things he used to do. She stated how she loved how he tapped the cobblestone with his walking stick and how he picked her up and swung her playfully. But no longer. It was time for him to go. It was time for them to leave. It was time for a life without Lestat by any means. Claudia knew Lestat would never let her or Louis leave him. He'd killed them before he'd ever let them go. Therefore, she hatched a plan to rid her and Louis from their maker for good, despite Louis not taking her seriously. She tricked Lestat into drinking dead blood, knowing it would be fatal to him. As Lestat became delirious and confused, he asked Louis to put him in his coffin. Claudia revealed the kitchen knife she had hidden in her dress and slashed a deep wound across Lestat's neck, spilling what seemed to be like a sea of his blood upon the floor. Lestat's body withered and his flesh seemed to disintegrate to the point where his skin appeared as if it was but parchment covering bone. Claudia felt no remorse for what she had done, and both she and Louis took Lestat's body to the swamp to dump it there, believing him to be dead. When making plans to arrange their departure for Europe, Lestat returns to the flat to seek revenge on both Louis and Claudia, more so Claudia for insinuating the murder attempt. He's set on fire by Louis and horrifically burned, but still manages to survive. The fire alone should have killed Lestat, but if you'd like to find out why it didn't, then make sure to click the card on the life of Lestat and watch it right after this video. Claudia travels across Europe with Louis in search of more vampires, but they find nobody of importance, just mindless, bloodthirsty creatures who weren't worthy of the dark gift. Transylvania being a huge disappointment, as so much lore and myth points to that location as the original place of vampirism. Claudia's travels took her and Louis to Paris, where Louis encountered a vampire known as Armand. Armand invited Louis and Claudia to the Théâtre des Vampires, where they watched a play involving vampires posing as humans, who were then pretending to be vampires. The play involved the actual real murder of a woman, but was disguised as part of the act. Afterwards, Claudia and Louis went down into the theatre's crypts where the whole coven were waiting, including Armand. Claudia was noticed by the coven immediately for being so young, just 5 years of age, the representation of something the vampires forbid. Armand later stated that Claudia's days were numbered the moment she revealed herself to the vampires of the theatre. She laughed off Santiago's relaying of the main rule that means death to all vampires, never kill your own kind. Claudia replied that the only death she fears is boredom. After they returned home, Claudia could see how Louis felt towards Armand and the whole encounter with the vampires. It was written on his face. He wanted Armand and Armand wanted him in return. She knew her adoptive father would leave her and demands Louis leave her a new guardian. Louis then changed dollmaker Madeleine into an immortal, despite hating the whole process behind it. However, he knew that Armand was inevitable. The attraction to him was overwhelming, something that he could not resist. Louis stated that the last of his humanity died with Madeleine's human death, but it was a shortcoming, as Louis would experience a pain he hadn't felt since he was human himself. Unbeknownst to both Claudia and Louis, Lestat went to the theatre to speak to Armand, asking him for help and explaining what had happened to him. In exchange for his assistance, Lestat had to openly admit before everyone that it was Claudia who attempted to kill him, something she thought she had been successful at. The coven kidnapped both Claudia and Louis in addition to Madeleine, who had not even fully transitioned at that point. The two are then thrown into an airshaft cell, while Louis's punishment was to be buried alive. Both Claudia and Madeleine are then destroyed by the sunlight, turning them to ash. This is all that was known of Claudia's fate from the interview book, but we do learn in the Vampire Armand novel that there was a lot more to the situation than what the reader is led to believe. Now, I've mentioned in the Armand video what happened between the two, but I didn't go into so much detail because I wanted to save it for the actual Claudia video, which is this one right here. In his novel, Armand speaks about his encounter with Claudia and what actually happened before her death. Claudia offered to leave Louis willingly if Armand could help her acquire a woman's body. This is all Claudia had ever wanted. It had completely consumed her, and it's not too difficult to understand why. This was an immortal woman of over 6 decades who was trapped in the body of a 5-year-old girl. She wanted this body more than she loved Louis. Armand refuses to divulge every single detail of what he did in order to help grant Claudia her deepest desire, but he does state that he will reveal it one day. However, here's what he did tell the reader. There was no actual way to transform Claudia's body into a woman's body. There was no way to transport her mind either. Although the tale of the body thief disputes this, the book wasn't written, so the option wasn't there. Armand knew that vampire blood had somewhat magical-like properties to it. It had rapid healing abilities and was able to transfer power from one vampire to another when consumed. What Armand didn't realize is that not everybody's blood is the same. He was not a surgeon, and his plan to remove Claudia's head and place it onto a vampire woman's body is so incredibly far-fetched that it really just proves how desperate he was to have Louis. Armand then took Claudia to his lab where he would perform the surgery. In order for Claudia to have the woman's body, Armand would have to kill a woman vampire, breaking the Coven's own rule of never killing their own kind, which is quite ironic if you ask me. Believing that Claudia's vampire healing skills would fuse with the body of the woman, he removed her head from her body and attempted to place it onto the new body. He will not explain what happened after that point, as it was so gruesome, so horrifying, that he cannot bring himself to speak the words. What I've taken from this is that the rejection of the transplant must have caused Claudia an overwhelming amount of pain. I also believe that the body of the woman had some sort of reaction to being fused with Claudia's head. However, that's just my own speculation. What is a fact is that Armand still gets flashes of the huge black stitches he used to reattach Claudia's head to her original body. Claudia was close to the point of death afterwards, and Armand did not want any evidence of his botched surgery left behind. Believing she would not survive, he put her in the air shaft with Madeleine, where the sun turned both bodies to ash, forever hiding the scars as Louis looked upon her with heartache. Claudia's spirit appears in the novel Merrick, and her words caused Louis to attempt suicide. However, it is still questionable as to whether it was actually Claudia that was speaking to Louis, as her words were extremely harsh. So I'll leave it there, everyone. Well, I have to, as I've nothing left to talk about when it comes to this intriguing, amazing character. No part 2 coming up, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to subscribe, as this video took a very long time to make. Anyway, thanks again. I will see you all in the next video.